Welcome back to The Backstory. I'm Jay Packer, and behind me stands one of the many small bore cannons here at Kennesaw National Park. Today, it's a peaceful sanctuary where hikers and history buffs alike come to get together. But on June 27, 1864, this very soil was soaked with blood. We're here to talk about a man and a woman whose names were largely forgotten by history for over a century. A man and a woman who, in the middle of chaos, chose courage over fear.
The Atlanta campaign was a chess match of epic proportions. On one side, Union Major General W.T. Sherman. On the other, Confederate General Joseph E. Johnston. By June, Johnston had established an impenetrable 7-mile arc of trenches right here. Sherman, frustrated by his inability to break the line, made a rare, costly mistake. He ordered a direct frontal assault. He sent his men straight into the teeth of Confederate artillery and rifle pits at Pigeon Hill and Cheatham Hill. In just 3 hours, 3,000 Union soldiers fell dead. But this isn't just a story about generals. It's about Austin Gilmore. Austin wasn't just a soldier in the traditional sense, at least not at first. An African-American who escaped slavery in Tennessee, he enlisted with the 111th Illinois Infantry. During the heat of battle, while the air was thick with smoke and lead, Austin served as a stretcher bearer. He had no rifle, he had no armor. He had only a stretcher and a heart of steel. He ran into the line of fire to rescue wounded soldiers, performing the brutal, essential work of saving lives under fire. He was eventually mortally wounded on June 27th and passed away days later. And for over 140 years, he was just unknown. Thanks to local historians, his name has finally been returned to history. Then there's the story of Emma Stevenson, an African-American nurse serving with the 17th Army, who fell to her death on this same battlefield on July 16th. She was so revered by her fellow troops for her high level of service that she was specifically singled out by her brothers in arms to be interned in the National Cemetery here in Marietta, Georgia. Because records of African American service members supporting civilians and slaves were so ill kept, historians agree that there were certainly many, many more African Americans who served with distinction. It is a historical fact that thousands of African Americans, enslaved and free, performed vital labor, from building trenches to burying the dead, for both armies, though their roles were often overlooked. Men like Frederick Douglass were staunch advocates for African American participation in the Civil War as a means by which to secure their freedom and to further integrate former slaves into the service. By the end of the Civil War, there were some 200,000 African Americans who served both in the Army and the Navy and other services. If you visit Kennesaw Mountain today, you're not just coming for a hike. The National Battlefield Park is a living classroom. The Visitor Center starts here. They have a 35-minute film called Kennesaw, One Last Mountain, an incredible museum that details the civilian, medical, and military cost of battle. There are over 22 miles of trails. You can hike to the summit. It's about 700 feet of elevation gain, or take the free shuttle to the top. Check out their calendar online. They frequently host demonstrations on infantry tactics, medicine, and camp life. Now for the moment you've been waiting for, the backstory. The Civil War was not merely a clash of blue and gray. It was a crucible that forced the identity of a nation in the fires of human cost. When we speak of the Union effort, we must speak of the men who stood in the gap, the African American troops. By the war's end, approximately 179,000 black men had served in the U.S. Army, and another 19,000 served in the Navy. They represented 10% of the entire Union Army. These were not just soldiers. They were fathers, brothers, and former bondsmen who traded the yoke of oppression for the weight of a rifle, fighting for citizenship they had yet to fully taste. Nearly 40,000 of them gave their lives, the vast majority succumbing not to bullets, but to the slow, silent rot of infection and disease. They were carpenters, scouts, spies, and surgeons. They fought at Milliken's Bend and Petersburg. They stormed the ramparts at Fort Wagner. They did not just participate in the war, they were the turning point of the Union's salvation. But behind the lines, the story is deeper still. It's a story of those who labored in the shadows of the conflict. The civilian slave and the impoverished worker, whose toil provided the very foundation upon which warring machines were built. Let's deal with the facts. Industrial mobilization. By 1861, the United States held nearly 4 million enslaved people. Their labor was the primary engine of the Southern economy, fueling the production of cotton, tobacco, rice, and war essential iron. 2. The human cost of war. Estimates suggest that the total death toll of the Civil War exceeds 600,000, a figure that includes at least 60,000 identified enslaved people who died from disease and exposure while forced into service. 3. Fortification labor. Thousands of enslaved people were impressed into service by the Confederate Engineering Bureau, forced to construct the defensive trenches and earthen walls that protected Richmond and Petersburg. 4. Self-emancipation. As the Union advanced, the flow of refugees was massive. At least 500,000 enslaved people escaped to Union lines, directly weakening the Southern labor force while bolstering the Northern effort. 5. Confederate medical labor. The Confederate Medical Department relied heavily on hired enslaved men and women to serve as hospital staff, nurses, laundresses, and cooks, maintaining the health of the Southern fighting machine. 6. Agricultural production. Despite the depletion of white male workforce, slave labor continued to produce the wheat and the corn necessary to feed both the Confederate civilian population and the armies at the front. 7. Industrial impressment. The Tretchner Iron Works in Richmond, Virginia, and other vital infrastructure hubs relied increasingly on the hired-out enslaved labor as white workers left for the front, proving that the Confederate war machine was physically sustained by enslaved labor. 8. The shift in demographics. The war resulted in the displacement of millions. By the end of the conflict, the dissolution of the Confederacy and the abolition of slavery resulted in the liberation of 4 million African Americans. And finally, the economic weight. Historians estimate that between 1619 and 1865, enslaved people in the United States contributed over 410 billion hours of labor, a massive economic force that the warring side spent 4 years struggling to control. Total compensation due to descendants amounts to $3.28 trillion US dollars, or $73,000 for every African American man, woman, and child currently living. Of course, there's no fair way of calculating the massive level of dehumanization suffered by African Americans over such a long period of time. But suffice to say, a settlement in the aggregate would be a great first step in healing the wounds of this most devastating conflict. They were the hands that built the fortifications, the scouts who navigated the swamps, and the soldiers who claimed victory. Their story is the story of America, forged in blood, written in sweat, and laying in wait of due compensation.
History just isn't about dates and names of generals. It's about the Austin Gilmores of the world, the people who stepped up when the stakes were at their highest. Come to Kennesaw Mountain, walk the trails, learn the stories, and remember the cost of freedom we enjoy today. Want to know more about the unwritten stories of African American history? Give this video a like and a thumbs up now, and subscribe to keep seeing more great content. I'm Jay Packer, and this has been The Backstory.